Welcome back to the Brahmin Word, and we are continuing to walk through the life of Peter. But today we are going to be talking about the moment where Jesus foretells that Peter is going to deny him not just once, but 3 times. So we are just going to look at the moment where Jesus foretells that denial, and then, of course, that denial we'll look at separately. But today we are going to be taking a look at this moment where Jesus lets Peter know that Peter is going to deny him 3 times. But we are going to be moving around. We're going to be looking at all 4 Gospels: Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. So let's begin in the Gospel of Matthew. So turn with me to Matthew chapter 26, verses 30 through 35. We're just going to make a couple notes on every single passage and then make a big note at the end. And one big observation that I see from this, though, is, of course, we see by Jesus foretelling this that he is God. But we also see, though, I think that this is not supposed to be this shame on you, Peter, for what you're going to be doing, but it's almost like, look, even when we as followers of Jesus drop the ball and when we finish short, when we make mistakes, it doesn't mean that Jesus is done with us. It actually kind of means the opposite if we take that opportunity to learn from it. And so we will get to that at the very end of looking at all 4 of these passages today. So, Matthew chapter 26, verses 30 through 35. And when they had sung a hymn, they went out to the Mount of Olives. Quick pause. I would love to know what hymn it was that was sung. That would be really, really cool. But just to see how important worship was, even in the time of Jesus, awesome. Really, really cool to see that right away in verse 30. Verse 31. Then Jesus said to them, "You will all fall away because of me this night. For it is written, I will strike the shepherd, and the sheep of the flock will be scattered. But after I am raised up, I will go before you to Galilee." Peter answered him, "Though they all fall away because of you, I will never fall away." All right, so pause there. So Jesus makes this statement that they will all fall away from him. Basically, they will all flee or scatter once their teacher and once the Messiah is taken. They are going to run away. They're going to scatter, which you wouldn't exactly expect. You would probably expect the opposite, that they would stand firm, that they would try to protect and defend. That's kind of what you would expect, but here the exact opposite happens. But of course, the reason why that happens is because then the focus is totally on the fact that Jesus is here for a very specific mission and goal and purpose, which of course is his crucifixion and then his resurrection, setting up this grand redemption plan, of course. So I think that's kind of what we see here when we should be expecting some sort of defense from the disciples for Jesus. But Peter, though, pipes up and says, "I will never fall away." Now, on the surface, it seems like, yeah, I'm glad somebody said it. I'm glad somebody's going, "Hey, I'll do it." How we're supposed to read this, I think, is I'm glad somebody is stepping up, but it is, again, it's this getting in the way of this grand redemption plan that God has set up before time began. And so Jesus is going to basically kind of put Peter in his place. Verse 34. Jesus said to him, being Peter, "Truly I tell you, this very night, before the rooster crows, you will deny me 3 times." Ah, just what a knife to the heart, right? And I think, though, this is kind of the point because you literally have, as we'll see in one of the other gospels, you have this conversation about who is the greatest, and then you have this remark from Peter. And so I think there's this aspect that Peter could have said what he said in verse 33, sorry, with a little bit of pride in his voice, like, I will never fall away. Now, again, is that the way that was said? It's hard to tell, of course. We weren't there. But based off Jesus's reaction and him telling him that he is going to deny him 3 times, I I think it's interesting to say that there could be some sort of pride behind Peter's statement. Um, so Peter hears this about the denying Jesus 3 times, and of course he has to say something in return. Verse 35. Peter said to him, even if I must die with you, I will not deny you. And all the disciples said the same. So he is very much this leader, this outspoken leader of the disciples. And we kind of talked a little bit about that earlier with that inner circle of Peter, James, and John, which we'll actually get to next week when we take a look at what Peter does in the Garden of Gethsemane. So I think it is interesting here to see that he pipes up again, I won't deny you. I think, again, how this is written, you do see a lot of maybe hidden or secret pride here, though they all fall away because of you. I will never fall away in verse 33. In verse 35, even if I must die with you, I won't deny you in verse 35. Now, it is interesting because, of course, every single one of the disciples besides John, including Judas Iscariot's replacement, Matthias, they all get martyred for their faith. And John, by the way, yes, he doesn't get martyred, but he does suffer greatly for the cause of Christ. And so it is interesting that he says, even if I must die with you, I won't deny you. And he literally does. He doesn't die with Jesus, but he does die for Jesus. He is martyred later on, which we'll get to that later on as well as we get further along in the life of Peter. But now let's go to Mark chapter 14, because I want to continue to look at just the different accounts of this passage, because this passage is extremely important in the life of Peter. So Mark chapter 14, verses 26 through 31. And when they had sung a hymn, they went out to the Mount of Olives. And Jesus said to them, you will all fall away, for it is written, I will strike the shepherd, and the sheep will be scattered. But after I am raised up, I will go before you to Galilee. Peter said to him, even though they all fall away, I will not. And Jesus said to him, truly I tell you, this very night, before the rooster crows twice, you will deny me 3 times. But he said emphatically, if I must die with you, I will not deny you. And they all said the same. So you see pretty much the exact same in Mark chapter 14. And then in Luke chapter 22, this is where it gets interesting, because you have this conversation between Jesus and the disciples, because the disciples were debating amongst themselves who was to be regarded as the greatest in Luke chapter 22, verse 24. And then directly after this, it's not even Simon Peter saying something or Jesus saying something like what we saw in Matthew 26 or 14. Instead, it's a little bit different. So Luke chapter 22, verses 31 through 34. Simon, Simon, behold, Satan demanded to have you, that he might sift you like wheat. But I have prayed for you, that your faith may not fail. And when you have turned again, strengthen your brothers. Peter said to him, Lord, I am ready to go with you both to prison and to death. Jesus said, I tell you, Peter, the rooster will not crow this day until you deny 3 times that you know me. I think that's really, really interesting. It is interesting to see that in verse 31, there's a couple things going on here. First, it's really interesting that he uses the name Simon instead of Peter. Remember, he gave Simon the name Peter earlier. And so the fact that he goes back to using the word Simon is almost like a parent with a child. For me, it's Kyle Michael is my middle name. So if I got in trouble, it'd be Kyle Michael, what did you do? So here it's interesting that he brings up the name Simon. It's almost like, hey, I've really tried to help you out, Peter, before, and so therefore, Simon, come on. It's almost like that. But what's interesting is in the original language, in verse 31, the you here in verse 31, both yous, saying demanded to have you, that he might sift you like wheat. What's interesting is that you is actually plural. It is not singular. But then the rest, verse 32 is singular. And so you have this really interesting statement from Jesus that Satan is actually demanding to have all of the disciples, or maybe a majority of them, knowing that he has already influenced, and as we saw in the Gospel of Luke earlier with Judas Iscariot, Satan entered into Judas called Iscariot in chapter 22, verse 3 of the Gospel of Luke. So it's interesting to see this, that is it possible that Satan is demanding to have them? Well, as we kind of talked about with Judas Iscariot, which you can go back to that, if you are a follower of Jesus, Satan cannot possess you. And so what I think Jesus is getting at is that Satan wanted to get at the disciples and to trip them up, to tempt them, whatever it might be. That phrase at the end of verse 31, that he might sift you like wheat, is really just kind of painting that picture. But then you see in verse 32, "But I prayed for you that your faith may not fail." And what's interesting about that in verse 32 is that those yous in verse 32, the you, and your, in verse 32 are all singular. And so I think this is Jesus saying, of course, Jesus is praying for the other disciples as well. But knowing what Peter is about to say and knowing how Jesus is about to respond to him, that Peter is going to deny him, he wants Peter to know that I have prayed for you, that your faith may not fail, even though you are going to deny me 3 times. I am praying for you that your faith may not fail. Whoa! Like, how encouraging is that? Because Jesus does the same thing for you and I today. Jesus prays for us, even in the midst of the times that we fall short. And I'm so grateful for this because I have fallen short as a believer. And I'm so grateful that my Savior prays for me. And he prays that my faith may not fail, even in the midst of knowing that I'm going to fall short. And that's just, what an encouragement, right? And so it's a lot to wrap your mind over. And then, of course, you have the foretelling of Peter's denial there. But I think that mentioning of Satan demanding to have you all, that he might sift you all like wheat, but then making sure he lets Peter know, while also, of course, he's praying for the other disciples, to strengthen them, to encourage them. I think, what a beautiful thing to see. And then finally, the Gospel of John here, in John chapter 13, verses 36 through 38. Simon Peter said to him, "Lord, where are you going?" Jesus answered him, "Where I am going, you cannot follow me now, but you will follow afterward." Peter said to him, "Lord, why can I not follow you now? I will lay down my life for you." Jesus answered, "Will you lay down your life for me?" Truly, truly, I say to you, the rooster will not crow until you have denied me 3 times. So here it's really interesting because, again, you get from Jesus, he knows about the future martyrdom of his disciples. And I think he makes that clear, especially with Peter, at the end of verse 36, where I'm going, you cannot follow me now, but you will follow afterward. Some have thought that could mean about heaven. I don't think so. I think more so it's actually more interesting and really powerful to think about the fact that Peter is going to be martyred for the cause of Christ. I think that's really what you're supposed to read from this, especially with Peter's response at the end of verse 37. I will lay down my life for you. I think that's probably more so what's going on. But what's interesting is after this one, he literally goes into chapters 14 through 17, or this final farewell message that Jesus gives. And he starts it out in John chapter 14, verse 1. Let not your hearts be troubled. Believe in God. Believe also in me. And this really basically comes right after Peter says, or Jesus tells Peter, that Peter will deny him 3 times. And then he follows that up with, but don't be afraid. Believe in God and believe also in me, even in the midst of the moments where you fall short. And so for me, I think what a beautiful reminder, not just from the life of Peter, but of course from Jesus himself, that even as followers, even for us as followers of Jesus, when we drop the ball, and we will drop the ball, when we fall short, when we make mistakes, when we sin, we have a God who absolutely loves us, who's praying for us. Before those moments even happen where we sin, he is already praying for us. He's praying to strengthen our faith. And then he calls us to not be afraid and to believe in God and believe also in him, knowing that he is God, and and just knowing that we can come to him not just for forgiveness, but also for the strength to continue on, even though we know that we've broken the heart of God by sinning against him. And so I think, oh, what a great reminder from the life of Peter. So thank you for spending a little bit of time with me today as we looked at the foretelling of Peter's denial. Next week, we will continue on, and we're going to start with just taking a look at what Peter did in the Garden of Gethsemane. So thank you for spending a little bit of time with me today. I will see you next week. Thanks.